sorts of nice things about Jack. Forget it. I confided in Jack. Where is he sitting? I'm missing him right now. Jack, where are you? Right in the back. That's where you ought to be. I confided in him. I'm going to tell you the whole story so you understand what a rotten guy he is. I was on a phone call with my mother and talking about my grandma who just had hip surgery. She's still in the hospital. She's poor woman. She's fainting every time she stands up. She's got low blood pressure. And I got off the phone and I said to my mom, I said, I love you. And she said, have a nice day. Goodbye. Which is totally normal in my family. You have to understand my family grew up not being very affectionate. That was not the way I was raised. We didn't hug. We didn't show a lot of affection. I always knew they loved me because I had food. But that was the kind of extent of it. So I get off the phone and I just kind of mutter under my breath. I say, I'm going to get that woman to say that she loves me one of these days. And Jack heard that, so I had to explain to him my family circumstance, and I said I didn't really grow up hugging, and I didn't grow up telling people I love them, and I've got better at it. I've been working on it. And I confided this, childhood devastation. And he turns it around and uses it as a way to prank me so that you all hug me. Look, if you want to hug me, I will hug you. I love you all dearly, so just deal with it, Jack. But I do think you should know the kind of person you're dealing with. So the topic this evening is set your house in order, and that comes from a particular text in the Old Testament. And in order to really appreciate it, because it's really not even a Bible saying anymore. There are some things from the Bible that have become so ingrained in society, so ingrained in how we think that we just use them, and a lot of people don't even realize it comes from the Bible. If you tell someone, set your house in order, they don't think you're saying a Bible thing. That's just a type of thing that people say, well, it's time to set your house in order. But it's actually from the Bible. And it comes from King Hezekiah. In 2 Kings chapter 20, King Hezekiah, who was a godly man, became very sick. And it said, in those days Hezekiah was sick and near death. And Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz, went to him and said to him, thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. So it's the Bible saying, and it just goes to show you that the Bible has affected us as a society and a culture more than we realize. The same America that says, oh, we don't need God, see, we're fine without Him. Most of the things that people like about America came from people who followed God. And we just don't give Him the credit anymore. But that doesn't mean He didn't say it first. And so God says to Hezekiah, look, you are going to die. And so I want you to set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. I have a friend who used to work in funeral homes for a living. And he was one of the most upbeat men you would ever meet. Still is. And that just amazed me. Here's a guy working with death every single day. And yet, you would never have guessed it. He was just so optimistic. You show him a half full glass and he would try and argue it was 3/4 full. I mean, he was that optimistic of a person. And I was talking to him one day and I said, Cal, what is it? What's wrong with you? Essentially is what I told him. I said, there's something wrong with you. And he said, it really is working in the funeral business. Because there's one thing you learn over and over and over again. He says, I see people burying their children. I see people burying their moms and their dads, their spouses. I see people who die and it was expected. I see people who die and it was very... I see funerals where nobody shows up. And then I see funerals where there are hundreds and hundreds of people there. And he says, I'll tell you, the one message you get every single time that is consistent is get to living. You see, talking about death is typically viewed as a negative. We don't like to talk about it, but death is really about life. It's really the report card at the end, isn't it? What you've done with your life, you don't to find out until you get to the end of it. Up until that point, there's time to change the record. But then there becomes a note of finality to it. And thinking about that, now Ecclesiastes says that it's better to go to a house of mourning because man will consider his end. And that's what we want to do, is to consider. Not because you're dead now, but because you have a whole life ahead of you, and death is all about life. And here's Hezekiah as he neared the end of his life, and he's told, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. So I want to break this down so that we can understand how to live, because how a man is taught to die tells you all about how a man is taught to live. That word set is huge, and we're going to talk about it quite a bit here just in the first part, just this one single word, because in one word there's a huge statement made. Set your house in order. Now that word set is used a lot of different ways. If a doctor sets a bone, he says we have to set the bone. And then talking to David, who apparently likes to set his own. I don't recommend that. But if a doctor sets a bone, what he's doing is he's making it the way it ought to be. Right? If it's broken, it's in different pieces, it's in jagged edges, it's not pointed the way it ought to be pointed. So to set your house in order is like setting a bone, where you're taking and you're now going to take something and make it the way that it ought to be. Now what I want you to see as we begin this lesson is Hezekiah was told this lesson near the end of his life, but then afterwards he's going to be given 15 extra years. Because Hezekiah is going to reach out to God after being told, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. And he's going to beg for some more time. And he's going to be given 15 more years. And what do you think he should do with those 15 more years? Set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 says everything in the Old Testament is given to us as an example so you and I might learn something. Hezekiah got a 15-year head start on set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. Some of you are being given a 50, 60-year head start on that. The message is still the same, isn't it? Whether you've got 2 years left, 10 years left, 15 years left, 50 years left, is it any different? So set your house means make it as it ought to be, just like you're setting a bone. My mother... I have my mom and my aunt and my uncle. My mom is a twin, so my mom and her twin sister are the oldest, and then my uncle is the youngest. And he has told this story so many times that every single one of the cousins, oh no, Uncle Ron, not again. He is a bitter man. When he was a kid, he was the little brother, and he always wanted to play Monopoly. But he had two older sisters who were always on the same page, identical twins. They think alike, they talk alike, they were just side by side and everything. And so he would beg his sisters, Sharon, Karen, yes, that's their names, twins, Sharon and Karen. Sharon and Karen, well, please, will you play Monopoly with me? Please, will you play Monopoly with me? And they would always say, if you set it up, we'll play. And so he would put all the effort into setting up Monopoly. And if you've ever played Monopoly, it takes a little while to set up. You got the little money, and you got the little the thimble and different things, and you've got all of the different community cards and all that. And he'd get it all set up, all laid out. Everybody's got their money divvied out to him. And then he'd call out to him, and he'd say, okay, it's time to play. And then they would be off talking to boys. And so they would never play, and it drove him nuts. And that's why I have had to have my childhood hearing about Monopoly. And so I finally offered to play with him one time, and he was like, it's too late. But the point is, when we talk about setting something, if you go to set up a board game, what you're doing is you're putting everything in order, just like setting a bone, but you're putting it in order to begin something. When we set something up, what you're doing is you're laying a good foundation to move forward. Set your house in order means get it all in order, get it all set up so that then you can get to living correctly. And this is one of the great problems of mankind, is that a lot of times we're so busy trying to live life the way we want to live it that we never put the effort into setting the board game up first. Our marriages aren't working, and it's because we didn't put God first. Our children aren't growing up the way they ought to because we didn't put God first. Our businesses aren't doing well because we didn't put God first. We go through life and we cut corners on spiritual things and then expect our physical life to turn out well. And I can just tell you, it doesn't work that way. And in fact, God tells you as His people, He will discipline you. You more than any other human being on the planet, taken out from underneath you if you don't set yourself up right because God loves you. And He will make you fail in something you want to succeed in if you don't set the game board up right, because He loves you too much to let you succeed in something when spiritual things didn't come first. You want promotions in your career, you want to move forward, you want all these things to happen, but you cut corners with your spiritual life, you cut corners with your attendance, you cut corners with your family, you cut corners with your Bible study. God, how can we expect God to bless us when we don't put first things first? It's just part of it. Set your house in order. Let's put the game board in order. And then another way we use this is that we use this with racing. On your mark, get, set, go. That is gear. When you have a racer and he is at that get set stage, on your mark means, okay, you're lined up. Here's the line, here's the starting line. Get your feet lined up right where they ought to be. Get set is that moment when you see the sprinters and they get their feet in the blocks and they pop up and they're in that position that's kind of awkward and uncomfortable, but it's every muscle is coiled and ready to spring. One of the keys to a successful life is to look at it and say, am I ready to live that life that God intended me to live? Am I excited to do it? Psalm 57 down verse 7 says, my heart is fixed, O God. My heart is fixed. I will sing, yea, I will sing praises. Can we say that about ourselves, that our heart is fixed? Because whatever your hand finds to do is going to be great. Ecclesiastes is pretty clear. Whatever your hand finds, do it with all your might. God does not care what job you pursue. He doesn't care what part of the country you live in. He doesn't care about a lot of those details. They're just really not important. How many kids you have, what age you get married, what age you retire at. None of those things matter to Him. What kind of car you drive. Those things don't matter to God. But what does matter to Him is your heart is fixed. I know many Christians who are blessed financially, but their heart is fixed, so it's no problem. I know other people who their heart isn't fixed and they get lots of money and all of a sudden it ruins them. And I know the opposite. I know some Christians who are absolutely destitute. They have very little money. I mean, look, Jack comes back from Africa and he tells you about many of these faithful, godly people, and how much do they have? Almost nothing. But if their heart is fixed, does it matter? They're going to be just fine. But on the other hand, if somebody loses something and their heart isn't fixed, how many times in the history of the world have people lost something and then blamed God and fallen away because things got hard? See, it happens all the time. It's not the loss that did it, and it's not the prosperity that did it. It's on your mark, get set, go. And so Hezekiah is being, however much time you have left, make sure that you're set for success from this point forward. What you did yesterday is of absolutely no consequence. What sort of hole you are in right now is not really a problem to God. God can take somebody with a whole host of problems, and if their heart is fixed and they're set and ready to be used by God and ready to serve Him, and they say, okay, I'm going to put first things first, and I'm going to live the way you want me to, God can take somebody with a whole world of problems and no time to get everything squared, can He? Have everything going for you, but your heart is not fixed, you're not set, it will not work. I have seen some people in the Lord's body who were given so little and did so much with it. But in the sad truth, I've also seen the opposite, some who have started and had so much and done so little with it. Both are true, right? And it all comes down to set your house in order. So set your house in order. The second part is your house. Now, think about Hezekiah for a second. Hezekiah is a king. His house is a very big domain. He's not just talking about, when he says set your house in order, he's not just talking about where Hezekiah lived. He's not saying, Hezekiah, before you die, make sure all the cobwebs are swept out of the corner of the palace. That's not what he's talking about, is he? He's not talking about make sure that all of your servants are paid and up to date and your taxes are squared away. That's really not even the major thing either. What he's talking about is that domain of influence that you have. That not merely where you live, your abode, but the realm in which you have an impact. And for Hezekiah, that's actually a pretty big sphere, wasn't it, as a king? Make sure that everybody whose life you touch, you've done right by them. And really the same thing goes for you and I. And we have some questions that we need to ask ourselves in regard to our house. Because whether you live in a palace, or you're a child still living in your parents' home, or you're renting, or whatever. I mean, I don't care. Maybe you live in a Pinto. Your house isn't where you live, not in this context. It's the lives and the influence you have. And every single one of us has those. Think, for example, about a couple of different things. Of the people that are your loved ones, is there anything that you are withholding from them that you ought not to withhold? If you were to die today, it's a good thought exercise. Most of us don't expect to die tonight, so we don't think this way, but it's a good thought exercise. If I were to die tonight, would there be anybody that I would call between now and then and say something to, because I would be afraid that they wouldn't know how I felt about them? If your answer to that is yes, call them tonight. Don't wait. Don't put it off. There's no guarantees. Jack and I joke about the whole hugging thing, but that's exactly why when I talked to my mom on the phone, I ended it with, I love you. I know my family's not really affectionate. I know that's not the way we normally talk, but I do love her. And I need her to know that. And as I'd mentioned, my grandma broke her hip just before we came here. And at one point, I was trying to decide. I had a lot to do to kind of get ready for the meeting. And we had some things going on at home and drive to go see my grandma in the hospital. And my dad kept saying, she's fine. There's no problem. You don't need to come. And I was trying to decide, do I need to go to the hospital, go see my grandma? She's fine. I mean, it's nothing I can do that the doctors aren't doing. But I was struggling with that. Have you ever had that feeling? Do I go? Do I not go? And my wife turned to me and she said, will you regret it if you didn't? And that was my answer. I got in the car. I said, oh, yeah, that's right there. Because if something did happen and my grandma did die, she didn't, but if she had, would I have regretted not making the hour drive to go see her in the hospital? And the answer was yes. If there is anything that you are withholding from those you love right now, stop doing it. That's your house. If there's any sort of bitterness or grudge that you have festering, if there is anybody in your life that you have offended or has offended you and you've just said, look, I can love them from about a mile away. And you know there's a problem and you know that you could do something to reach out. The problem when there's grudges or bitterness is it is a two-person deal because sometimes you can't do everything. That's why God says, as much as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Sometimes you can't be at peace with people because it doesn't all depend on you. But if you ask yourself, you say, is there anything I can do? Don't ask, well, they haven't done their share. Don't ask that question. That's their house. You worry about your house. Is there anything I can do to be a peacemaker? Because Christ said something about peacemakers, didn't he? Do it. Don't put it off. Don't wait till tomorrow. Set your house in order. If there's any work that is left undone, any sort of commitments to things that you said you would do, that may be as simple as a honey-do list. I know what those are. I'm guilty of those. My wife said, I really could, it would be great if you could fix this hinge over here, it's squeaking. It's a 5-minute job to fix a squeaky hinge. WD-40 is a blessing. I love the stuff. But I do have to go out to the garage. I do have to think, okay, go out to the garage, put the little straw in the thing, come back in the house, bring a paper towel with me, spray it, wipe it so that it doesn't drip all over the door jamb, then take it back out. And it'll take about 5 minutes, and I'm doing other things. And so sometimes a 5-minute job that my wife has asked me to do just because it's something that I should be able to do. It's in my capability, my realm of work that I would typically do around the house. She asked me to do, but she doesn't want to nag, and so guess what? 6 months later, it's still squeaking. Don't do that. Don't be Scott. Don't leave any squeaky hinges behind. If there's work you could do, do it. If there's anything that you could accomplish, any good, any effort that you could put out, now's the time to do it. If there's any promises that you have made that you have left unfulfilled, it's time to start fulfilling those promises. Set your house, that realm and domain of good in which you can do. Proverbs chapter 3 down in verse 27 says, "Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do it." Ecclesiastes makes the point that he says, better is a living dog than a dead lion. You know why? Because even though a lion is really scary, but I was a zookeeper, I worked with lions. A live lion is a terrifying and majestic thing. It will take your breath away. If you've ever been this close to a lion and the only thing between you and it is some sort of chain link fence, industrial grade, that's all it is, by the way, for the zookeeper sometimes, is industrial grade chain link. It makes your heart stop. They are a powerful thing. But a dead lion, a live dog can hurt you more than a dead lion. I worked, very quick aside here, one of the animals that I worked with at Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium was polar bears. And polar bears get up to roughly 2,000 pounds. The males can. And there was one we had named Tillamook. And he was getting old. And I worked with him for years. And I would get that close. There was the bars on their bedrooms. So we called them their bedrooms. It was just a big cage in the back. But they called their bedroom. The bars in diameter were about this big. And so I would get that close. So that the only different distance between me and, at the time, about 1,200 pounds of polar bear meat was that distance. And he was terrifying, and you respected him. Nobody ever had to tell you to watch out for the polar bears. You just did. But then one day I showed up at the zoo, and there's a whole lot of commotion going on early in the morning, and it turns out he died. Tilly had died. And so they needed a bunch of guys to go and take a dead polar bear up to the vet office up on the top of the hill. And so you get a forklift and you get some men and you go. And I drug a full-grown polar bear. Along with some others, we put him up in the vet's office. And I was there, we cracked the chest open. And I put my hands in his mouth and held his teeth. And you know what? No damage. Because a dead polar bear doesn't do anything. But I've had some scrawny little chihuahuas that have bit me. While you can do something, while you're still kicking, do it. Get to living. Get to doing it, because whenever you die, you will no longer have power in your hand to do anything. It'll be gone. So do it while you have the ability to do it. Colossians chapter 3, some verses to think of along of your household. Husbands, love your wives and be not bitter against them. If you've been fighting with your wife, just stop it. And I know that's really not good counseling language. If we were counselors, what I'd do is you have a husband and wife and they disagree with each other, I'd say, lay down on the couch and tell me all your feelings. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell you, husbands, lead your house, forgive your wife, and get up and get to live in a marriage. Because at some point, you just have to. You just got to bury the hatchet. Husband, love your wives and be not embittered against them. Proverbs 23, verse 13, withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beat him with the rod, he will not die. That's another thing, sorry kids, that you should do while you have the power to do it. Every parent will tell you there's a point where the child grows up, and can you discipline them anymore? That ship has sailed. So while you are in a position to correct and train your children, don't say you'll do it tomorrow. Do it today. That's your household. You're accountable for it. They won't die. They'll tell you they're going to die. I've had kids walk along the edge of the wall because they didn't want me near their rear. But that doesn't mean they're going to die. Don't withhold correction from them. Do you see the language there of Proverbs chapter 23? Withhold not correction from child. Correction is a gift that only a parent can give. You're the only one in the world who can say, look, straighten up and fly right because I love you. And they will look at you the way children are made by God to do, and look at you and want to live up to your expectations because they're designed by God to do that. Even kids who have dysfunctional parents want mom and dad to be proud of them. So much so that it becomes a problem sometimes. What we seek the appreciation and value from our parents. We seek the respect of our parents to our own hurt, even as grown adults sometimes. Do not withhold correction from your children if it's in your hand to do it. They need it. It's a gift from them. It'll show them the boundaries, and it will let them know when they're doing right and when they're doing wrong. Because a child who has boundaries knows they're loved, and they know when they are doing things that make parents proud. Proverbs chapter Proverbs 24, verse 27, prepare thy work without, and make it ready for thee in the field, and afterwards build thy house. Life is too short to spend the whole time feathering your nest and making life easier for yourself. Do the work first, just like we talked about with entitlement. Do the work first, and then enjoy the fruits of your labor. So set your house. Think about that sphere of influence that you have, and do it now, because you have no guarantee of that influence later. Life is full of people who will come in and out of your life. Capitalize on the time you have with them in your life, so that when they leave your life, they're better for the association they had with you. So set your house in order. Now this is the next piece of it. Set your house in order. In order has the idea behind it of things being in an organized fashion. When you talk about the idea of the way God works, is God an orderly God? You don't make atoms with protons and neutrons and electrons that travel around at such a speed, and the magnetic force that causes everything to exist together, and the forces of gravity, and all of these things that you and I see, the design. Have you ever looked at the leaf of a plant? It's like looking at a wall, at the cells, the way they're designed and put together. It's everything in this world that you and I live in is designed by God. Can you imagine if God wasn't organized? It'd be a bit of a problem for us, wouldn't it? You know, up is down and down is up. One morning the sun comes up, the next morning you go, oh, that didn't come up. If God ran the universe the way you and I run our budget sometimes, or the way some teenagers' rooms look, I mean, look, let's be honest. We count on God being consistent in the way He does things, don't we? It's a very big deal, and everything that we do counts on that, and it requires it. So God is a planning and organized God. And so when you think about God, you appreciate the value of Him making plans. Ephesians chapter 1 talks about Him, and here's God, and it says that God planned for the church before the foundation of the earth. God's planning for what you and I are a part of right now, the salvation we have in Jesus Christ, the kingdom. That planning began before one atom was made. And I'm very, very thankful for that. And we're made in His image, and we're told to be imitators of Him. You take the qualification for elders. 1 Timothy chapter 3 down to verse 2, when it talks about an elder, also known as an overseer, it says, he therefore must be without reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober-minded, and orderly. When we look at leaders within the church, we expect them to have a sense of orderliness to them, don't we? That's not just a sense of dignity and decorum, although that's very nice, but also they know how to get things done. What do we feel about when you have leadership that doesn't know how to lead? It's a problem, isn't it? If you have leaders who don't know how to guide the people in the ways that they should go, they don't have proper oversight, all sorts of problems happen. An orderly life is one that recognizes there has to be a plan to the whole thing. Set your house in order means there has to be some design that you're shooting for, some sort of goal. Do you believe that idea with your life, that your life is not just something you bumble through, but there should be an overarching plan for what you want from it? Because that's essential to a life well lived. It's essential to living a godly existence. And it's essential to all of these individual parts of life that we care about so much as well. Think about a family. Many times what happens in a family unit is that we just kind of go day by day, but if mom and dad have a plan for what they want for their children, and they have a theme to their family. My kids will tell you, we have kind of some, first and foremost, God comes first. My kids know that. But then as a buyer, we have certain things that we talk about being a buyer means. And there are things like buyers don't quit. That's a big, big element of being a part of my family. It's a part of the theme that Jenna and I have developed for our kids. Buyers don't quit. And I can tell you a really funny story. My daughter's old enough now that she just laughs at it too. But when Holly was like 3 or 4, we went on a hike one time, and we're going on this hike. And at first I thought I was going to have to carry her, but then I realized she was actually doing pretty well on this hike. And so I was letting her walk, and then we got about halfway there, and I realized I haven't carried her at all. And I got in my mind, I thought, now if she can finish this hike without me picking her up, she's going to just feel great about herself. So I decided, Holly, you're halfway there, you can do the whole thing yourself. And then about 3/4 of the way there, I realized that was a really bad mistake. Because from halfway to 3/4 of the way, her little 3-year-old legs just fell apart. And so she got tired and grumpy, and so she was complaining, and she kept wanting me to pick her up, but at that point I'd committed. And if you've ever done that as a parent where you committed something, you thought, I probably shouldn't have committed to it, but I did. So here we are, we're finishing the hike in the last 1/4 mile, she has to make it. And I kept saying, you can do it, Holly, you're doing great. And just remember, what is it, buyers? And she goes, buyers don't quit. And so she did that, kept going, buyers don't quit. And then we got like 1/8 of a mile out, and she goes, buyers do quit! They quit! They quit! They quit! And thanks be to God, one of the guys we've been hiking with came right over the edge, right at that moment, and said, Holly, you're almost there. And that was enough to get, and she made it the whole way. But these are themes, and your theme doesn't have to be my theme, and you go, feel free to be a better parent than me. But think about these things in your life. What is your plan for reputation and legacy? What do you want to be known for? I mean, if you don't ask the question now, the answer is just going to be the default when you die, isn't it? I mean, do you really want to die and then wait for them at your funeral to figure out what you're remembered for? Or would you like to kind of set in people's minds what you will be remembered as before that day comes? I'm not going to be at my funeral. All that will be there will be my legacy. Whatever message overarching I have said in my life. People will not remember the individual mistakes at that point, and they won't remember the individual successes. It'll just be an overall theme to who you are. And you think about it, that's what you do with people right now anyways. If I tell you the name of somebody, you just instantly have a feeling and kind of a picture of them that pops into your mind, good or bad, don't you? You don't think of every individual act. You just kind of glom it all together, distill it in a bottle, and that's who they are. If people were to do that with you, what would it be? And then ask yourself, is that what I want it to be? And if it's not, what do you need to change to make it change? What's your plan? That's the whole point of In Order. What's the direction for your children? What do you want your kids to grow up saying that life is all about? What are the things, if you had a top 10 list of things that you wanted your kids to know? There's a movie a long time ago about a man who had terminal cancer, and his child was going to be born right after he died. So he began to videotape lessons for his son. And as he was doing it, he was trying to think of the things he wanted his kids to know at the various stages of life. If you had to make a list of the things that your kids would know about life, if you had to make a top 10 list, what would it be, and have you instilled that in them? These are the questions we've got to ask ourselves because it's involved with planning. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 23 talks about the husband of the worthy woman. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. Here is the husband of this worthy woman, and he's known in the gates. That means he has a reputation for something. What's yours? You think Psalm 127, down to verse 4, as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of your youth. The problem is really not how many arrows you have in your quiver. It's where you're pointing them. If children are an arrow, you are going to pull them back and shoot them somewhere. Where's your aim? Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 27, inasmuch as it is appointed unto men once to die, and after this comes judgment. How many times are you going to get to go through this life? You get one shot at it. And so with that one shot, you got to do what you can with what you have where you're at. Which really brings us to the next point in this sentence. Set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. This is not stated as an opinion. And I understand that Hezekiah got 15 years after God said this to him, but does that really change anything? It's a distinction without a difference. Hezekiah, you shall die and not live. Whether it was 5 days from then or 15 years from then, is the truth still the same? You shall die and not live. That's just the way it works, isn't it? Two things that are guaranteed in this life, death and taxes. And somehow people manage to cheat on their taxes, but nobody ever does it on death. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, what is it that I am doing, considering that's a guarantee? It's not very often in life that you get guarantees. It's not very often in life that you can say 100% about anything. And this is one of the very few that you can. So since you and I know that it's going to happen, we know it's inevitable, and we also know another thing. When you talk to older people who are nearing death, they say the same thing every single time. It went so fast. So we know these two truths. You shall die and not live, and the amount of time you have to live is a lot shorter than you think it is. James describes it as your life is like a vapor. You watch a tea kettle and the steam comes off the tea kettle, and it's there for a little bit, but very soon and it's all gone and nobody remembers it. It just dissipates. You get one shot at this thing. Don't waste it. Don't put the wrong priorities into it. We spend our whole lives trying to accrue stuff, and yet you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse. When you die, they bury you in the ground, and you don't take any of it with you. The pharaohs of Egypt tried that, didn't they? They built the pyramids, and they put all sorts of stuff in there so that they would have it in the afterlife. And guess what happened? The tomb raiders came in, and they took all the stuff. That's not how it works. You're going to die and not live, so don't put your stock in things you can't take with you. As we mentioned in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 27, it's appointed unto men once to die, and after this comes the judgment. Also look at Psalm 9, verse 7. Jehovah sits as king forever. He has prepared his throne for judgment, the very next event that happens after you die. And we're going to talk about this in a more technical detail tomorrow night. What happens when you die? But for now, I want you to stick with one major concept with me. You're going to die, and the next major event in your existence is going to be standing before the great white throne of judgment before God. And He's going to make a call. And here's the thing. We've talked about an entitlement generation that's used to participation trophies. We're used to everybody wins and No. It's a pass-fail grade. You don't even get a B. You can't be like me and slide by with a B minus. It's a pass or a fail. You are either in Christ, in which case His grace covers your sins and you are blessed because you have put Him first and you gave your life to Him and you dedicated your life to serving Him in whatever imperfect sort of way you did. Right? We're not talking about a perfect life. We're talking about a life of commitment to Jesus. You either get that and He says, this one belongs to me, enter into the joy of your master, or you hear, depart from me, I know you not. And just because we don't like that that's the way it works, right? If you brought up that system of a pass-fail grade to today's American culture, do you think they would like that? If we got to vote in today's American culture on how it happens when you die, they would not vote for a pass-fail. But guess what? You don't get a vote. This is not a democracy, is it? He's the creator, we're the creation. He decides. So since you know that's the way it works, how much effort should we expend to make sure that we're on His side and we have that advocate in our corner? It's the only thing that matters. So you can talk about raising a family. You can talk about taking care of your spouse. You can talk about working hard as a servant at your job or any number of other aspirations and goals. You can talk about being a good citizen of America, and all of those things are all fine and dandy things, but they are all subordinate to the idea of being a citizen of heaven. My relationship with my wife, and my kids know this, is based off of the fact that I love her second. And I expect the same from her. And that's the only way it's going to work. I will go to heaven and I want her to go with me, but if I have to go without her, that's the way it goes. And I expect no less from her. And I want my kids to be the same way, so that if ever someday their dad goes bonkers and gives up on the Word of God, they say, God is over here, and Dad, you're over here, and you do whatever you want, Dad, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. If my kids have to tell me, look, you're going to make me choose between you, Dad, and God, and we choose God, that means I've done right by them. If it ever comes to that point. Everything in your life has to be subordinate to the day of judgment that you're preparing for. It's the only thing that matters. Everything else is secondary. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, rejoice, O young man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thy heart, and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. God likes it when young people are happy. God likes it when young people go out and they chase their dreams and they live their life and they smile and they're happy. He likes it the same way that older Christians enjoy having younger Christians in a congregation. Right? Younger Christians, look, I say this all the time, a congregation with only older Christians scares me because it's going to die off due to simple attrition. A congregation with only young Christians scares me because it's going to go liberal. Because you need the wisdom of age. Younger Christians look to older Christians and they say, you know something I haven't yet learned, can I get some of that from you? And when that works, it's slick stuff. Older Christians, though, look at younger Christians and they say, you have something I used to have and I don't have anymore. But I love being around that sense of energy. And it reminds me that life is good and God is good. God is the same way. In the same way that older Christians enjoy the energy of youthful people, God loves the energy of youthful people. I love the Song of Solomon. It's about romantic love and a shepherd boy and this girl who are just madly bonkers in love and just a couple of stupid, crazy kids. And you know what? It's a beautiful psalm about that kind of young romantic love. And God wrote it. So enjoy your youth, rejoice in it, let your heart be happy, do all sorts of fun stuff, stay up late, have fun, but remember, God will bring the end of judgment for all these things. There's lots of youthful things that you can do that are okay, and then there's other youthful things you can do that can ruin the rest of your life. And there is a distinction between the two. Which is exactly why when you talk to your parents, there's certain things that they are saying over and over again. Watch out for this. This is a real danger zone. Because they understand the consequences of certain things. We need to understand that the life we live has consequences, and the choices we make have consequences. And some have small consequences, and some have big consequences. And so when you're making decisions as you go through life, always keep in mind the judgment day, because don't ever make a decision down here that will have a big consequence that will affect up there. God could care less whether you drive a Buick or a Ford. That's really not that important to Him. He does care an awful lot about whether you're somebody who has more love for cars than you do for the Lord. This is the distinction that matters. And so live as somebody who is aware of the judgment day. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 down in verse 14, for God will bring every work into judgment with every hidden thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. I'm going to say something here that if you are somebody who has a hidden sin, particularly things like drunkenness or pornography, I'm going to say this, and I want you to understand something that you probably don't understand yet, but it is still true. If you are hiding a pornography addiction, it will come out. You will either fix it or it will come out. And even if you say, well, I can hide it my whole life, even if you can, I've yet to see that work. Even if you can hide it a whole life, is it still going to come out? On the day of judgment, every hidden thing. You can fool me, you can fool the brotherhood, but you can't fool God. Get help now. The most detrimental and dangerous of sins are the ones that we hide, and we think that if we let people know about it, if I expose it, it'll just make it worse and nobody will love me anymore. That's not true. I know, and I can tell you, without naming names, because I do have respect for the discretion of others who've gone through it, I know men that have talked to me about their pornography addictions and are now on the road to better. It can happen. Success is possible. These things do work, but not while you keep them hidden. The most detrimental sin to your soul is the one that you try and hide. And I just implore you with every fiber of my heart. Look, I understand the statistics and I know the world that we live in. These sorts of things are rampant, and they're not just rampant out there, they're rampant in here. And I don't say that because I know something. I just say it because common sense dictates that that's the way it works. And it's not just young men either, and it's not just men either. These things are problems. And we hide them, and we think, if anybody knew, my whole life will end. When the reality is the exact opposite. If nobody ever knows and you never get help, then your life does end. Exposing it to the light is the only hope. Get it fixed now and don't wait till later. Find somebody that you trust in the church, somebody who you know loves you, somebody who's older and wiser and stable and loves you, and tell them, don't wait till tomorrow. Life is just too short. Because every hidden thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil, will come out. 1 John chapter 4, verse 17, herein is love made perfect with us, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as He is, even so are we in this world. I'm going to try and say this without crying. Aside from my wife, my best friend in this entire world died less than a month ago. Many of you know him, Lowell Williams. And Lowell made a huge impact on a lot of people's lives. Mine was no different. And when he neared death, He was less than 24 hours away when I saw him the last time. And you talked to him, and I asked him how he was doing. And I was there when one of his kids, his grandkids, came in and was asking him. And I said, "Are you scared?" And he said, "No. I have no worries. I have no anxiety. I have no regrets. I'm ready to go." That is 1 John 4:17. That we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as He is, even so are we in this world. I want to finish this life saying, I'm not worried about stepping into the next one. It'll be okay. I've never done it. I've never been there before. It's an unknown. The angels are going to have to escort me there because I don't know my way. I'd get lost. But I'm going to step into that unknown with boldness because I know who I'm going to, and I know that I have lived my life for Him, and I know He's going to cover me with His grace because He said and He promised, and I believe those promises, and it's going to be okay. There's no greater wish I have for everybody in this room than that. That when you get near the end of your life, if anybody were to ask you, you say, I'm okay. I have no regrets. I have no anxieties. I know where I'm going. And it's not like he had no regrets because he hadn't done anything wrong. He knew he had done things wrong, but he also knew what grace was. And that, by the way, comes from studying your Bible. There's no way of understanding the grace of God until you start reading, because it's bigger than you can imagine. I want you to finish this life with boldness. Set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. This is the other controller, but Deuteronomy chapter 30, down in verse 20. To love Jehovah thy God, to obey His voice, and to cleave unto Him, for He is your life and the length of your days, that you may dwell in the land which Jehovah swore unto your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 20, is a speech given to the Israelites as they were going in to take the land. And I love the language that is used in there. Go into the land, live for God, follow Him, and He'll bless you. He's giving you a land flowing with milk and honey. It'll all work out. It'll all be great. But just remember this. He is your life and the length of your days. Paul would say in the New Testament that God knows the boundaries of our habitation. God knows exactly how far you will travel in your life, and He knows exactly how long you're going to live here. My wife, for the longest time, thought she would never travel beyond the Mississippi. She never had. She figured it was never going to happen. We got a call about a child who needed a home in Florida, and so we crossed over the Mississippi, and as we flew over it, we got to that point, and you can look on the maps and see exactly where you're at, and she said, look at that, God had a plan I didn't know about. And we've flown over the Mississippi a couple more times, and every time we come back with a kid, and so now my wife's afraid of flying over the Mississippi. But I just go to show you, God has a better imagination than you do, doesn't He? He's your life and the length of your days. Stop worrying about what you want your life to be or what you think your life is going to turn out like. Stop worrying about what's going to happen down the road. You don't know how long the road is. I'll use Lowell as an example one more time. Lowell just passed away. It was 85 years old when he passed away. I came on to preach in the congregation of Monroe because Lowell thought he was only going to have a year left to live. I've been preaching there now 11 years. He was 10 years off. He had 10 more good years in him. You don't know squat. I used to enter his office every Monday morning, and when I would walk in, I'd say, "You dead yet?" Because it was a joke. He was so wrong about it. And the reality is it happens with all of us, right? We have these things in our mind. We think, I'll only live to here, or I'll live, or the opposite of that, we say, I'll keep living till this, and then wham, the semi-truck hits you. You don't know. You don't know. He's your life. So the only smart thing, if He's your life and the length of your days, is to take your life and put it in His hands, because He has it already. All you're doing is acknowledging the reality. It's like if you have $0 in the bank and you go around acting like you're a millionaire, that doesn't make you a millionaire. We go around walking around like we're in charge. That doesn't make it so. Christians are the brightest people on the planet, the smartest people on the planet, because they acknowledge reality. He is your life. He is the length of your days. So just acknowledge it. And then this wonderful thing happens. It's not my problem anymore. Because if it's His life and He's in charge of the length of my days, all I have to do is get up every morning and set my house in order for that day. And then I go to bed, and if He gives me another day on this earth, it's His life and His length of days, right? If I wake up in the morning, all I have to do is take care of that day and set my house in order for that day. And that's exactly what Jesus said in the New Testament, because He says, be not anxious. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Simply worry about today. That's all you're in charge of, is one day at a time. So don't worry about yesterday. You can't do anything about it anyways. Acknowledge the reality. Whatever it is, it's not your problem anymore. Don't worry about next week or next month or 10 years from now. You can't do anything about it anyways. Acknowledge the reality. Simply take the 24 hours that God has given you and do something with it. So that when you lay your head down on your pillow at the end of the night, you can say, I have no regrets. I have no anxieties. And then when you wake up the next morning, if He gives you another day, you can say, rejoice, for this is the day the Lord